It is all good.
Look at her already going, because you acknowledged her existence. She knows, she speaks English. I keep trying to tell people.
I'm just like so adorable.
It is all good.
I'm sorry, that's the echo. So I'm gonna start letting folks in. Hello, everyone. Thank y'all so much for joining. We're going to get started in a few moments, but super excited for this teach-in for various reasons. One, Breya's teach-in is the first teach-in for our 2022 series for the School for Black Feminist Politics. And second of all, who doesn't want to learn from June Jordan? So yeah, thank y'all so much for being here. We're going to get started soon. Also, as folks come in, feel free to share your name, your pronouns, where you're based, and how June Jordan has inspired you or continues to inspire you. So we're going to get started in a few moments. Also, y'all, like I said before, feel free to drop your name, your pronouns, where you're based, and how June Jordan inspires you. I love to read, where folks are and where they're based. So just want to give some folks a shout out. Let's see. Hi, Sheila, and I'm in Germany. Thank you so much, Sheila, for being here. We appreciate you so much. Super excited. We're going to get started in a few moments, y'all. Breya, you got folks from Germany for this teach-in now. Sierra from Maryland. Hey, Caroline from Miami, Florida. Kesley, student in Washington, D.C. Brittany from Brooklyn. Kumba, hey, how you doing, Kumba? Dom from Philly. Yeah, Debbie from Jamaica. Wow, great, great, great. Krista from Trinidad and Tobago. I saw someone from Brazil. Oi, tudo bem? Okay, y'all, this is really great. So please feel free to share. I'm going to start this, officially start this event. My name is Jamie Swift. I am the executive director of Black Women Radicals. And if you're not familiar with Black Women Radicals is a Black feminist advocacy organization dedicated to centering and uplifting Black feminist activism around the world. Thank you so much for being here today for the kickoff teach-in for Black Women Radicals School, the School for Black Feminist Politics. Established in 2020, the School for Black Feminist Politics is the political education arm of Black Women Radicals and has a mission of empowering Black feminisms in the field of Black politics from intersectional, transnational, historical, and contemporary frameworks. Before we officially get started with the event, I want to offer a land acknowledgement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of this land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. I'm currently situated between Piscataway, Pamunkey, the Nintengo, Mattaponi, Chickamauhony, Monacan, and the Powhatan land, which is now known as the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area. However, I also want to acknowledge enslaved African peoples who were forcibly brought here to these lands and who also built this area in the U.S. as we know it. So I'm going to offer that land acknowledgement. I also want to reinforce that this is a safe space, right? So no oppressive behavior is allowed. Anti-Blackness, fat phobia, colorism, transphobia, I don't accept it. BWR doesn't accept it. And we will kick you out if you don't abide by the safe space. So thank you so much, y'all, for being here. Once again, I'm super excited that the Breya Johnson will lead two teach-ins for this 2022 School for Black Feminist Politics series. Her first teach-in today is Becoming a Menace to Our Enemies, the Transformative Teachings of June Jordan. We will also announce the second teach-in shortly. And Breya, I want to properly introduce you, so I'm going to read your bio. Breya M. Johnson, she, they, is a cultural worker and freelance writer living in Brooklyn, New York. Her work looks at the modes of disposability, Black health, reproductive justice, radical love, and abolition. She's interested in the inner workings of Black women and girls and is finding a location for healing in the writings of Black folks globally. So without further ado, thank you so much, Breya.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm so happy to be here to do not one, but two teach-ins and kick off this year's series. I love Black women writers and I love Black women radicals. So I'm so happy to be here today. And we can get started. We can jump right into it. And I see some of my lovely friends in the chat, and I love y'all too. Let me know. All right, wonderful. So, becoming a menace to our enemies, the transformative teachings of June Jordan. And you can go to the next slide. So before I begin, I want to ground you all in just who I am as a person and as an educator. Jamie read my bio, and I just have to, reiterate some things that are in there. I am the Black queer woman behind Black Reading to Heal on Instagram. I'm a writer, cultural worker. And again, my work looks at radical love, care ethics, reproductive justice, Black health, disposability, and the inner workings of Black women and girls. And I'm looking at reading and writing, but more specifically, Black women and queer Black people's writings as a location for transformation and healing specifically, right? I'm looking at the utility of words for a purpose. You can go to the next slide. So if you know me and you've ever followed me on Twitter, you know that I am very, very big on reflective questions and journaling. So if you have your journal or your notes app or your desktop or anything, I would like for you to write down these journal questions. And I hope that in your time this month or this spring, you answer these questions. And I hope that the work of June Jordan, some of what you get today, helps you answer these questions. So we're going to start off with one of her peers, Tony K. Bambara, when she asked the question, what are we pretending not to know today? What are we pretending not to know today? I want you to ask yourself that. What aspect of your heart is at the peripheral? Ooh, that's a big word for Elmo, but that's another question I want y'all to ask. And then lastly, who needs to hear your truth right now in this moment? When will you deliver it? Those are my 3 questions for you all to journal later on. And I'm hoping that June Jordan helps you get closer to a spirit of courage in order to answer those questions with the full truth. We can go to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about my girl, June Jordan. June Jordan was born in Harlem, New York. She lived in Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy to be specific. That's my daughter, Baldwin, in the back. She was the daughter of Jamaican immigrant parents. She was considered a warrior poet, a poet of the people, a playwright, an essayist. She was also a professor. She attended Barnard College. She taught at Berkeley. She taught at City College here in New York, Sarah Lawrence College as well. And I believe she also taught at Yale. She was an anti-war internationalist, right? She talked about Baghdad. She talked about South Africa, Bolivia, Uganda, Palestine, you name it. She talked about it. She talked about war wherever it was. She loved architecture, right? She did a lot of city planning in Harlem because she knew the importance of that. She loved music. She loved love. She was a mother to a boy named Christopher. She was interracially married and then divorced. She had around 3 to 4 abortions. She considered Fannie Lou Hamer to be a mother to her. She authored over 28 books, including children's lit, countless poems, and countless essays. So picking the essays that I wanted to teach with you all today was so hard, but the title of this is Becoming a Menace for a reason, and we can go to the next slide. So here's some of her other essays that you all can look up in your own time. These are some that I really like. And go to the next slide. Specifically today, though, we're going to be kind of using a total of these right here. So poem, the resolution 1003. If you know me, you know that is like my scripture. A poem about my rights. The book Directed by Desire. The essay, Many Rivers to Cross, the essay, Black People in the Law, the essay, The Blood Shall Be Signed Onto You, the essay, Breast Cancer Still Here, the essay, I Am Seeking an Attitude, her foreword in the book Civil Wars, her essay, Where is the Love, her essay on Moral Leadership as Political Dilemma, and lastly, A Test of Atlanta. And a few more, but those are the ones I want you to kind of focus on for today. And you can take a screenshot and read them later. So now we're going to listen to June give one of my favorite poems by her, Why I must become a menace to my enemies. Go ahead.
The one of you who fear me, be afraid. I plan to give you reasons for your jumpy fits and facial tics. I will not walk politely on the pavements anymore, and this is dedicated in particular to those who hear my footsteps or the insubstantial rattling of my grocery cart, then turn around, see me, and hurry on away from this impressive terror I must be. I plan to blossom bloody on an afternoon surrounded by my comrades singing terrible revenge in merciless accelerating rhythms, but I have watched a blind man studying his face. I have set the table in the evening and sat down to eat the news. Regularly I have gone to sleep. There is no one to forgive me. The dead do not give a damn. I live like a lover who drops her dime into the phone just as the subway shakes into the station, wasting her message, canceling the question of her call, fulminating or forgetful but late, and always after the fact that could save or condemn me. I must become the action of my fate. How many of my brothers and my sisters will they kill before I teach myself retaliation? Shall we pick a number? South Africa, for instance. Do we agree that more than 10,000 in less than a year, but that less than 5,000 slaughtered in more than 6 months? Well, what is the matter with me? I must become a menace to my enemies. And if I ever let you slide, who should be extirpated from my universe, who should be cauterized from Earth completely, law and order jerk-offs of the first, the terrorist degree, then let my body fail my soul in its bedeviled lecheries. And if I ever let love go, because the hatred of the whisperings become a phantom dictate I obey, in lieu of impulse and realities, the blossoming flamingos of my wild mimosa trees, then let love frees me out. I must become a menace to my enemies.
Can we just sit with that for a moment? I am going to drop the link for those of you who do better with reading. For that specific poem, I'm going to put the link in the chat for you. I always get chills when I hear her recite that poem, and it just makes me think about what the spirit of rebellion actually means. And later I'm going to get into what her life was like and why someone like her would write a poem like that. But what does it mean where the very people who are hurting you, who are dominating you, who are essentially your oppressors, cannot rest, cannot know peace, cannot know joy, because you are their menace. And until they get their foot off your fucking neck, they can't know peace, right? Like, I love everything she gets to in that poem. And so we can go to the next slide. Some of the central things that are throughout June Jordan's essays, writings, you name it, are these central kind of questions. Where's the love? Which is an actual poem she wrote. Where's the rage? Which is another poem that she wrote. And where's the sisterhood, right? Three very important themes. She's always grappling with love. She's always grappling with rage. She's always grappling with community. Sometimes that's sisterhood, and sometimes that's like beyond sisterhood, right? But those are very, very, very critical things to her. And we can go ahead and play the video that's here as well.
Talking about freedom, we're talking about freedom. Every sphere of your life, and certainly the sphere of your heart, should not be something relegated to a peripheral issue. My heart is not peripheral to me. In my work, it's true. I do write about women who are strong because.
Wonderful. I love that so much. And then let me read some of her quotes that are in Where the Love. You can go to the next slide and play her in for me, please, Jamie. So as she asks these really important questions, where's the love, where's this, as she does a lot of truth telling, what we have to understand about June Jordan is that writing and specifically poetry were key political tools for her, right? They were actually the first line of defense in her regard. Her friends who wrote tributes to her always said June is always writing. She's always writing. She's always telling somebody to write, and she always wants us to put it down on paper. And I'll talk about why in a minute. But specifically, what bothers me all the time is that people think that poetry is solely for their entertainment, right? Poetry is the thing that you just ground the space in. Poetry is how you just start off the event. You do a little poem here and there, and everybody gets hype. Here it is, right? But actually for June, the function of poetry has a very profound function, right? It is a political tool. It's a healing tool. It's serious. And so she writes in the foreword of one of her books, she says, and so poetry is not a shopping list or a casual dissertation on the colors of the sky or a Sephoric daydream or a bumper sticker. Poetry is a political action undertaken for the sake of information, the faith, the exorcism, and the lyrical intervention. The telling the truth makes possible. Poetry means taking control of the language of your life. Good poems can interdict a suicide, rescue a love affair, and build a revolution in which speaking and listening to somebody becomes the first and last purpose to every social encounter. That definition of poetry, I think, is one of the most important definitions I have ever seen, right? But more specifically, when she talks about like poetry can stop a suicide, poetry can rescue a love affair, right? Poetry has built revolutions. Wherever there was a revolution, wherever there was rebellion, wherever there was anybody erecting the internecine pain in their bodies, there was a poem that was a part of that, right? And she knows that. And so I hope that you all know that too. And we can go to the next slide, which I believe is also a video. Yeah, you can play that.
Tell me something. What you think would happen if every time they kill a black boy, then we kill a cop? Every time they kill a black man, then we kill a cop. You think the accident rate would lower subsequently?
June Jordan's poetry is about telling the truth.
Can you imagine if Twitter was around when that poem dropped? Yeah, so she says very explicitly, what do you think would happen if every time the police killed the little black boy that we killed the cop? I believe that's from a poem about police violence. And then if you've ever read her essay on Atlanta, she talks about the murder of Black children and why is it so okay to do that, right? And so what she is saying is, if I'm going to be a menace to my enemy, I got to make you feel how I feel, right? And if I have to feel what it's like to lose my son, to lose my daughter, to lose the members of my community, why don't you feel the same way, right? And so I'm not exciting violence, government agents. I'm not doing that today. But that is another example of what she means by becoming a menace to her enemies. And in her essay, she also says you need to know who your enemies actually are, right? So we don't want to misdirect our rage. That's not what she's advocating for. She wants you to know exactly who your enemies are. And to do that, you have to ask questions. And her poem about my rights, one of the questions that she asks that I love so much, she says, and who the hell set things up like this? That fundamental question for me is where a lot of resistance begins. When you start to question why things are the way that they are, and you get to a place where you're like, oh, actually, who made things like this, right? That's how you identify who your enemies are. Very, very, very important message. We can go to the next slide. Let me see. 1 second. So I mentioned a poem about my rights. And so she says, I have been the meaning of rape. I have been the problem everyone seeks to eliminate by forced penetration with or without the evidence of slime. And but let this be unmistakable. This poem is not consent. I do not consent. To my mother, to my father, to the teachers, to the FBI, to South Africa, to Bed-Stuy, to Park Avenue, to American Airlines, to the hardened elders on the corners, to the sneaky creeps in cars, I am not wrong. Wrong is not my name. My name is my own name, my own, my own, my own. And I can't tell you who the hell set things up like this, but I can tell you that from now on, my resistance, my simple and daily and nightly self-determination may very well cost you your life. Again, another way that she's telling you how we become a menace to our enemies, right? What does it mean when your daily and nightly pursuit of self-determination has to cost someone else their life, literally or figuratively? Again, I'm not inciting anything, but what does that process actually look like? And so when I go to her foreword in the book Civil Wars, she says that the first bully in her life was her father, right? And she says that her uncle actually taught her how to fight her father. And, she says that it was important to learn to not ask for intervention all the time, but to learn self-defense, right? She says, I've loved words and I hated to fight. But if as a Black child in America, I could not evade the necessity to fight, then maybe I could choose my weaponry at least, right? So here she's talking about the fact that she had to physically fight and she had to fight with her words, and that she did both. She said, I loved words for the sake of the people that I loved. Very important. And that this was a way that she was able to escape different variations of conflict in her life, right? And so what does it mean when someone like June Jordan is asking us to become enemies, menaces to our enemies? She's talking about our rights. She's asking us to pursue our self-determination. What do all of these things mean to us when she's saying that you do it first by language and then you also have to actually fight? For me, my interpretation is that she's not somebody that thinks that the revolution is going to just be written. She's not somebody that thinks that the revolution is just going to be in a book. I think it's a both and for her. And I agree, right? I can say all day that I'm finding the location for healing in Black women's readings and writings all I want to, but I also know at the end of the day that our access to healthcare and the state of Black mental health in this country is a direct reflection of the systems that are dominating us, right? So I'm not arguing that we can completely self-recover our way out of anti-Blackness. And I think June Jordan understood that as well. We can go to the next slide. So, what's really important to me as someone who cares so deeply about Black women writers is that we take them up fully. I don't want you to read Black women writers and just be like, oh, I love her. She's so great. Love that book. It's on my bookshelf, yada, yada, yada. I think the best way to respect Black women writers is to undertake their work, right? You don't write for decades of your life the way that June Jordan did for people to not actually do and try to implement the things that you were theorizing about, right? It's not enough to put her on your wall, tell her happy birthday, and call her your ancestor if you are not trying to undertake her work. That's important. Yes, somebody said put theory into practices, right? Okay. So in order to do that, I also think it's really important to take them up fully and wholly, right? June Jordan was not a perfect person, but beyond that, the world was not good or kind to June Jordan. So let's talk about it. June Jordan was a rape survivor twice. And she wrote profoundly about the fact that the first person who raped her was a white man. The second person who raped her was a leader of the NAACP, and was a Black man, right? She writes extensively about the abandonment from community that she felt when it was intra-community violence that harmed her, right? She talks about the fact that the first bully in her life was her father because he was not happy with having a girl. She talks about the fact that her mother battled severe mental health disorders, right? To the point where her mother actually ended up dying by suicide. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. She also talks about the fact that she received multiple abortions. And because of the state of reproductive violence in this country, majority of them were bad abortions. She ended up in the hospital because of a bad abortion, right? What is her relationship, what is her work's relationship to reproductive justice? She talks about what it meant to love and be taught by Fannie Lou Hamer. Let's talk about lineage here, right? She was a single mother. She married a white man, experienced violence from that white man, had to divorce that white man, and that white man was with another woman right after he was with her and left her with no money, right? Again, another violence. She lived in the projects. She battled cancer for almost 10 years. That's 10 years of her life that she was writing through that illness. She lost her mother to suicide. I already told you that. And she was grappling with her gender, her sexuality, the world, all of that. She was teaching at City College at a time where they were abandoning free tuition, where they were trying so hard to get the school to reflect the actual population of Black and Puerto Rican students, and at a time where they were rejecting open enrollment because prestigiousness, right? Because of excellence. At a time where she was joining so many anti-war protests and so on, right? That is the full whole, at least that I can give you today, of June Jordan. And a lot of people walk away from cherry picking a couple of her poems that they like, and they never know what went into that poem. A woman without her experience is probably not going to write the Menace poem. She actually knows what that means. So when she's trying to tell you what it means to seek your self-determination and what it means to stand up, she's telling you for a reason, because her daily survival all throughout her life required the things that she is writing to you about. Okay. I don't know many Black women who come to writing as just a place of joy. If you do, I'm so happy for you. But I know that a lot of us have had to come to writing as a place of self-preservation, as a space before war, and as a space of healing, and as a space of teaching, so that the next generation of Black women don't have to do or go through all of those things, right? We write with a sense of urgency. And that's why the transformation is so possible, because we understand that the stakes are so high. When you are battling breast cancer, nothing is a joke to you. You understand that your time is limited. You understand premature death better than anybody. And that's why her work is so sharp and righteous, because she understood that. She has poems where she's telling death, not today. I got more work to do, right? She understands. And that's why it's really critical to take her up full. One thing that I love about June Jordan is that she has a reputation of being a poet who told the truth. They said she would tell the truth when nobody would tell the truth. This is a woman who was saying that it is your moral obligation to stand up for Palestine at a time before anybody was saying that. She said it was your moral obligation to stand up for gay and lesbian people at a time where who was doing that? Okay, so a truth teller, if you will, but she's not a truth teller for the fun of it. She's a truth teller because she understands that that is one of the first steps in becoming a menace, right? And that's why I asked you, what are you pretending that you don't know today? Why are you pretending that? You know the truth, right? It's in your throat. How do we let it out? She's how we get that. One of my favorite quotes by her, I think that this quote is in I Am Seeking an Attitude, where she says, "Why do I write without hesitation about the injustice that freed the cops who beat up Rodney King, and then I keep to myself the qualms about the fact that he has been charged with beating up his wife?" I'm gonna just let that sit. When her mother died by suicide, she says, "Why did it take my mother so long to defend herself against my father? Why was suicide her final defense?" That's a question. It's a very difficult question, right? I'm going to let that sit. I'm trying to read the chat and stay focused. So when I'm thinking about a woman who has experienced as much pain and as much violence as June Jordan, I personally can't allow us to not understand her writings in that context as well. And so thinking about the fact that she died of breast cancer at the age of 35 after 10 years, what we know is that actually a lot of our Black women writers die young, and they almost all of them who I'm about to name have died from a reproductive cancer. June Jordan died at age 65. Audre Lorde died at age 58. Barbara Christian died at 56. Pat Parker died at 45. Lorianne Hansberry died at 34. Toni K. Bambara died at 56. Lucille Clifton died at 73. Gwendolyn Brooks died at 83. All of them died from cancer. Bell Hooks, most recently, died at age 69, I believe. How do we understand who she's asking us to name as our enemies if we're not situating June's writing in the fact that she understands that her peers are dying from this? She understands that Black women are dying from breast cancer, and she's writing and thinking and living with that hanging over her head. What does that say about her work? And how can we look at her work, not just as her as a poet, but perhaps her as a reproductive justice organizer in her own right? I think that that's one way to look at it. I'm going to read a little bit more from Forward because she says some really important things. Oh, does she? Actually, what do I want to read? Give me 1 second, y'all. It's in one of these books. Oh, who is in it? Okay. Oh, the chat is just amazing right now. Hopefully we can get to all of your questions. Okay, I'm going to pivot a bit, and we're actually going to read from I Am Seeking an Attitude, which is one of my favorite essays by her. And in one of the quotes, she says that, pride does not arise from suffering. Pride develops as we resist our misery, as we revolt against, and as we lose all misery from our days and nights. And so I know pride as a Black woman and as a woman of color, because Black people and people of color resist oppression, and because we loathe actively every source of our unequal liberty, our unequal entitlement under law. We behold our racial identity as a call to arms, a summoning of ourselves into a battle of power and territory and wealth and happiness and well-being. We declare war against our enemies. We wage war for the sake of our self-determination. We, in this case, of colored people, includes me. I love that quote as well. Again, that is from I Am Seeking an Attitude. I just had to read that one more time for y'all because it is so profound. And then on the topic of her breast cancer, she wrote about that a couple of times. Similarly to Audre Lorde in the Cancer Journals, you'll find various essays and poems from June Jordan as she battles the disease as well. And so she says, and here I am today, trying to assume responsibility and trying not to turn away from an enemy that never seems to sleep or opt for permanent relocation. Here I am, hoping to take heart from those who gather themselves against individual impotence. Here I am, hoping to hearten those who still hesitate to publicly address this moment. This most private ordeal, nevertheless, depends upon public visibility for its vanquishment. I want to stay here for a second, because I'm talking about her relationship to cancer for a reason. Because to her, and this is a theme all throughout her work, she says it very, very, very clearly. She is making something that is relegated to the private sphere public. We can argue all day long if Black women even have a private sphere with the way the government be intervening and shit. But what she's saying is that me suffering is somehow considered my own problem. Me suffering is something that's supposed to happen in closed door. I'm supposed to suffer in private, right? And she's saying, no, we write these poems, we write these essays, and we do the work that we do because we make our pain visible. And that is also one way that we become a menace, right? That is what the utility of truth telling is for. And I think that that's really important. And so in this essay, the essay about cancer is where she writes what she believes activism is. And she says, activism is not issue specific. It's a moral posture, steady state, propels you forward from one hard hour to the next, believing that you can do something to make things better. You do something rather than nothing. You assume responsibility for the privileges of your abilities. You do whatever you can. You reach beyond yourself in your imagination and in your wish for understanding and for change. You admit the limitations of individual perspectives. You trust somebody else. You do not turn away. It's one of my favorite poems by her. I really hate when people act as though with Black women writers, and in their writings, there's not quite literally a blueprint. And what I mean by that is that I hate when we act as though Black women's theorizing or theory is something that's not tangible to us, right? It's something that they are not giving us concrete steps for. So when someone says to me, okay, being a menace to my enemies, Breya, that sounds really great, but it sounds really kind of like abstract, kind of big. What do you actually want me to do? She's saying, you assume responsibility for the privilege of your abilities. You do whatever you can. She's saying you admit the limitations of individual perspectives. If you're going to admit the limitations of individual perspectives, what do you have to do, class? You have to go gain a collective perspective. Yes, that's what you do. She says you trust somebody else, right? Who can you trust and why? And she leaves it with, you do not turn away. How does someone like June Jordan, I mean, she was an immigrant, so now let me not say that, but how does someone like June Jordan speak so profoundly about war all over the world, right? How is she talking about Bolivia? How is she talking about South Africa, Palestine, and all these other places? It's because she's telling you, you do not turn away. So if you spot suffering somewhere, you have the moral obligation to tell the truth about it. That right there is one concrete, intangible thing that we can do today, right? And it's all throughout her work. And I think it's really, really interesting that this is in an essay about her experience with breast cancer, right? There's something so deeply interconnected about our struggles as Black women individually with our own health that sometimes propel us into these universal and like collective ways of thinking, because you start to ask yourself, how many women are in their room all alone with breast cancer, right? You start to ask those really profound questions, and that's exactly what she was doing. And for those of you asking, that essay is in Life as Activism. So don't worry, you're gonna get a reading list. Really, really, really important. I'm loving all the hype in the chat. I love y'all dearly. So when she says, to go back to the questions that I had asked earlier, the central themes that I had put in the slideshow, when she says, where's the rage? She wants you to use that rage for a reason. Where is the rage? Why aren't you angry? at what is happening, right? She was in like the documentary, A Place Afraid. She talks about, I'm increasingly livid, right? One of my favorite things to hear people say, and by favorite, I mean, ha, 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 is when people are like, you're so bitter. You are acting so bitter. And it's like this individualized critique of the Black woman. You are bitter. And me, what I say, and what I say in response, because I have read so much of June Jordan's work, is I say, is this environment sweet? Is how you are treating me sweet? No? Okay, so then I'm not the only bitter thing here. So why would I meet bitterness with sweetness? That doesn't make any sense. And that is a common theme all throughout her work, right? That's how you become a menace to your enemy. And one of her peers is Audre Lorde. And we know what Audre said. Audre already told us about silence. You're not going to kill us and think that we enjoyed it, okay? At least not me. We can go to the next slide. Wonderful. So what else did I talk about? So again, where is the cherry poem? I have in my notes all these poems to read y'all, and I just love chaotic energy because I didn't write down the page numbers. So we're going to find them together. It's all good, right? Okay. I'm going to read y'all another poem by her. It's called On Moral Leadership as the Political Dilemma. She says, I don't know why, but I cannot tell a lie. I chopped down the cherry tree. I did that, yes, sirree. I chopped down the cherry tree. And to tell you the truth, see, that was only in the morning, which left a whole day and part of an evening to continue doing what I like to do about cherry trees, which is to chop them down, to pick the cherries, to roll them into a cherry pie circle, and then stomp the cherries, stomp them, jumping up and down, hard and heavy, jumping up to stomp them. So the flesh leaks and the juice runs loose, and then I get to pick up the cherries, and depending on my mood, then I fill my mouth completely full of the cherry pits and run over to the river, the Potomac, where I spit the cherry pits. 47 to 65 cherry pits spit into the Potomac at one spit. And to tell you the truth, some more, if I ever see a cherry tree standing around, no matter where, and here, let me please be perfectly clear, no matter where I see a cherry tree standing around, even if it belongs to the middle American of moderate means of a 2-car family that is falling apart in a respectable, civilized falling apart, mind your manners manner. Even then, or even if you happen to be corporate rich or unspeakably poor or famous, or fashionably thin or comfortably fat, or even a particular as misguided as a Democrat, or even a Democrat, even then, see, if you have a cherry tree and I see it, I will chop that cherry tree down, stomp the cherries, fill my mouth completely with the pits, to spit them into the Potomac. And I don't know why it is that I cannot tell a lie, but that's the truth. I love that poem. And I love that poem so much because for me, what she's saying is, one, I'm gonna be a fucking hater. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your background is. If you are against my value system, one that is anti-war, one that is anti-capitalism, one that is anti-imperialism, then I'm gonna chop down your cherry tree. She says, I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you absolutely happen to be poor. I don't care if you happen to be rich. I don't care if you happen to be corporate, right? You have a cherry tree. So I have to chop it down. And so my interpretation is that you are being violent towards me or someone that I love. You gotta go. That's another way that you become a menace to your enemies, right? Even not all your enemies are going to be or look instantly as scary. So you have to have a value system. And if they are at opposition to that value system, then you know that that is your enemy and you know exactly what you have to do. Again, her work is telling you every step of the way how you become a menace. How are we gonna keep chopping down your cherry tree? Literally and figuratively, right? Maybe that just means, ooh, I was about to really say something wild. Anyways, so yeah, I really, really, really love that poem. And that is in the book, The Essential of June Jordan, which will all be linked, y'all. Another thing that she says in an essay is she talks about kind of like what she understands as the spirit of resistance. She's like, 1, it feels terrific. 2, I know it will prevail. 3, it's immune to enemy assessment. Y'all, to all my organizers on the call, is our resistance immune to enemy assessment? That's a whole nother talk. Anyways, 4, it agitates for one's life, one's soul. 5, it's basically and ultimately collective. 6 and 7, it feels terrific. Love that. So she's talking about the kind of the feeling of this work when you know that you're doing something that is life preserving, and that can get us into her work with life studies. I don't know if you've all had the chance. I don't have time to talk about that essay today, but she writes a really beautiful essay called, or it's an essay called Life Studies that I think that you all should read in your own time. Another way, so June Jordan was kind of referred to by some of her peers as someone who built a fortress from self-pity. So she was someone who was like, we're not going to stay there. Does that mean that she did not experience it? Of course not. If you read her work, she talks about pain, she talks about grief, she talks about her suffering, she talks about feelings of self-loathingness, but in her work, she built a fortress from that. And so what she seeks to do with all of us is to help us build that fortress away from self-pity. We do not have time to pity ourselves because we know that the state of our suffering is not our fault. It's not our own. So when you know that the way that you feel is not, one, the totality of your being, and you know that you are not solely responsible for the suffering that is in your heart, you don't have time for self-pity. You didn't do that to yourself, right? And I think it's important to understand that. She tells us, always telling us to write, use poetry, like I said. And she says, why? Because whose language have we taken on? That is really important. And if my laptop will work for a second, I will tell you why it's important. 1 second. So she says that if I do take on somebody's word or focuses on the role of language as the source of that power, right? So I told you all that her father was abusive. And one of the things that she kind of writes about in a couple of essays is she says that the primary power or source of power that her father had over her and her mother was language, right? The way he spoke to them, the way he spoke to his wife, the way he spoke to June, the way he was able to give their existence a meaning that belongs to him, not her, right? They give you language for you to internalize. And you have to ask yourself, whose language have I been trained to take on? Are the words that I am speaking over my being, over my life, over my people, over the world, is this my language? And that's why June Jordan is a poet, because she understands the very utility of language. We do language. I think Toni Cade Bambara also said that. Be careful what you give language to, and be careful what you don't give language to, right? We do language for a reason, because under domination, you have taken up someone else's language. And Black women like June Jordan are like, we're going to take that back. And she traces that all the way to her father, because like all Black feminists know, the personal is political, deeply and profoundly political, right? And so she talks about in a poem where she asked her father to tell her a dream. And he held me, she says, he held me on his lap as he gave me a word that he whispered. And the word was, what was the word? Oh, child. I think the word was cemetery. I'm just going to let that sit, right? What does it mean when the word that your father gives you, that you think that you have undertaken, is cemetery, right? And what is your lifetime of unlearning that? I think that that is so so important. And, you know, I think that to understand June Jordan, you have to really understand her life and why language is so important to her. And I think if you are on this call and you have ever experienced any type of specifically verbal abuse, then you also know the very, very function of language. And you also know why it is so important to take up a different type of language to understand yourself, right? And so I'm a big believer in we give people their problems back, okay? I will not internalize the problems that you have, and that will not be the totality of my being. So I will not undertake that language anymore. I'm going to give it right back to you. Here's your problem. Here's your language. Here's your words. Here's the meaning you have made over this situation, and you can have it back. And that is something that she spent doing all throughout her work. I think my interpretation is that she's been giving back the language that was given to her through all those moments of violence and saying, actually, this is what I think of myself, right? And that's why in a poem about my rights, she specifically says, I am not wrong. Wrong is not my name, right? That's so important. So important. And that's how you also become a menace to your enemy, when you give them back their language, because that is not your name. I don't mean literally your name, but you know what I mean. What else do I really want you all to know in these 30 minutes? Also really important is that, again, she always asks, where is the love? All throughout her poem, she wrote about love specifically. She wrote about her lover. She wrote about loving the world. And for June, having a particular type of love ethic and asking where is the love is, she specifically asks, can we love enough, love ourselves, one another, enough to do what it will take to change the world? In language plain and perfect enough to wake up every reader, she reveals what she calls the intimate face of the universal struggle, right? So can we love enough to care universally about people? And I'm gonna go on because I, like June, I do not have the love ethics that's like, oh, love thy enemy, let's meet everything with love. That's not the type of love that we're talking about today. And so I really want to ground our love in something a little bit deeper than that. And let's see where are we with time? We can go to the next slide. We've been on this for a minute or two. Okay, next one, please. So now that leads me to my absolute favorite poem by her. Oh my goodness. I think that this poem is like my scripture. It's on my wall, and it's how I have chosen to define love. So she says, I will love who loves me. I will love as much as I am loved. I will hate who hates me. I will feel nothing for everyone oblivious to me. I will stay indifferent to indifference. I will live hostile to hostility. I will make myself a passionate and eager lover in response to passionate and eager love. I will be nobody's fool. So when I say that we need to have a love ethic, I'm not talking about none of that silly shit. This is what I mean. And I'm not asking you to love somebody who was being violent towards you. I would never ask that of anybody. What I'm actually saying is that let's love enough to the point where we will meet hostility with hostility and indifference to indifference, but we still keep our hearts open enough so that when passionate and eager love comes through, we can meet it with passionate and eager love, right? And so for me, when I am bitter, it's because you are not sweet, and I am politically bitter for a reason. But don't ever think that I don't have the capacity to love, or that love is not innately mine, and that I am not loving on my people and loving on the people who are also committed to my self-preservation and my survival. That's really important, right? So that's why we have to stay really grounded in those things, because we're not talking about the same thing when we say love. At least I'm not. I don't know what y'all talking about. There is something else that I want to give you all before we leave. Yeah, again, so she talks about, I think I'll try to end this with, which essay do I want to end this with? Oh, okay, now it's getting hard, y'all. It's getting hard. It's so much I want to tell y'all. What do I want to end with? Yeah, I want to end with her essay, A Many Rivers to Cross, because she said some really great things in that essay that I love. And then I want to also end with her talking about children, because to know June Jordan's work is to also know the love that she had for children and their radicalization, right? And preserving their knowledge. So when her mother died by suicide, she writes about that in an essay. And she talks about the fact that she was living with her parents at the time when it happened. She had to move out because she was getting divorced and she needed to make enough money to leave. So she moves back in with her parents. And at the time she's pregnant and no one knows. Her son is living on the top floor. She's like living on the main area. And her father runs into her room and says to her, you know, I think your mother is dead and you need to go check. Go see if she's dead or alive. And in the essay, she's asking herself, what type of father puts the responsibility on his child to get up and go downstairs to see if her mother is dead or alive, right? Like she's speaking to just her relationship to this man, right? That he would even ask that of her. And she details specifically what it was like to find her mother dead. And right after that, when she finds that her mother actually is dead, she goes upstairs to get her son. She removes him from the environment. When she comes back, her father tells her that the insurance is in her name and that the money would be left to June, right? Obviously, that enrages her father, and they get into a literal fist fight right there, right then and there. She fights her father while everybody is there to honor the death of her mother. She's fighting. So I just want to really ground y'all in the life of this woman and what she has been up against, and to know that like these are not words to take lightly. This is not something that we're just going to bust out in a tweet. She has literally had to fight. And so in her essay, I Am Seeking an Attitude, I love that essay so much because she is talking again about the utility of rage. And she says very explicitly that she thinks it was a good thing that she swung on that man when she did, right? And again, that's why she posed the question, you know, why didn't her mother defend herself a little bit more? And we can talk all day long about the issues with that. I don't necessarily believe that this was the best way to speak about that, but I think it is honest. And she's talking about an honest feeling that she had in her gut, right? And what really, really compels her to fight back to her enemy, even when the enemy is her own father. And right after that fight, she ends up having to go to the hospital. And she had to either have another abortion or she had a miscarriage because of that fight, one of the two, right? That's the life of the woman that we are talking about. And she says that I cherish the mercy and the grace of women's work, but I know there is new work that we must undertake as well. That new work will make defeat detestable to us. That new women's work will mean we will not die trying to stand up. We will live that way, standing up. I came too late to help my mother to her feet. By way of everlasting thanks to all the women who have helped me stay alive, I am working to never be late again. I think that sentence really captures her expanding her capacity to care, right? So she's saying that I was too late to teach my mother how to fight or to help my mother fight. And what I am seeking, and I agree with her, and I think I seek this too, is to tell everyone else how we can live standing up and how we can make sure that we are never late for each other ever again, right? I think that is really important. And so she says that my life seems to be an increasing revelation of an intimate face of universal struggle. You begin with your family and the kids on your block, and next you open your eyes to what you call your people, that lead you into land reform, into Black English, into Angola, lead you back to your own bed, where you lie by yourself wondering if you deserve to be peaceful or trusted or desired, or left to the freedom of your own unflattering heart. And the scale shrinks to the size of a skull, your own interior cage, right? She talks about that. So I guess my question is, what are our own interior cages? And that's why I'm so invested in the inner workings of Black women, Black girls, Black people. What are our interior cages? And I think that she was a poet of the truth because she believed to get out of that interior cage, you had to give it language, new language. And so that is the biggest theme that I want us to walk away with her. And then very, 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 very lastly, because I skipped over this and I think that it's really important, is to never forget June Jordan's relationship to children. I want to give a very special shout out to whoever is running the June Jordan archive on Instagram. You're doing a really amazing job. And one of the best essays that was posted on that account was her essay, The Creative Spirit, Children's Literature. And then also in life studies, she talks about like what it means to preserve a child's voice. And she talks about the fact that she was giving children's workshops. And in those children's workshops, she had some specific rules of engagement for the adults. And I'm gonna end with these rules because I think that a lot of us need to take this up. So she says, number one, to preserve our focus and group's integrity, we must therefore observe the following courtesies. Please limit adult-to-adult conversations to an absolute minimum. Please join in the workshop by conversing with children, reading books or writing. Creative writing by guest adults during the workshop is welcome. Please do not, in the presence of the children, discuss the children or their work. That serves to introduce a competitive spirit that is antithetical to group harmony. Inquiries into techniques or promoting creativity or group cohesion or purpose should be reserved for some separate adult-to-adult occasion that can be arranged. Criticism of the children's writing should not be offered unless prior discussion with at least one of the directors. Please note, in this workshop, policy that children's writings are not subject to adult correction. On the other hand, excessive praise can discomfort children and impede their willingness to exploration. Please do not attempt to look over the shoulder of children while they are writing. Creative expression of oneself requires a medium of privacy. These were rules of engagement for a workshop that she was doing. I actually think that we should engage children like this damn near in general, right? So what does it mean to see our rebellion and becoming a menace to our enemies as also understanding the very particular way that we also need to politicize children, actual children, and our own inner child? That is one of the final steps that I'll say, how you become a menace to your enemy. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, these are just some words from some of her peers who truly loved June Jordan. So Angela Davis says there was always joy in her rage. Politics was her life. Collective pain as well as collective resistance was always something she felt in a deeply personal way. That was Angela Davis. You can go to the next slide. Alice Walker has said this of her, that June Jordan, she is the bravest of us, the most outraged. She feels for all. She's the universal poet. Toni Morrison says June Jordan's career was 40 years of tireless activism coupled with and fueled by flawless art. All that aside, she was a joy to know. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to end here. I feel like we need like 2 more teachings on June, but I hope that you learned a little bit about the power of transformation using her work. And if you need me, this is my contact information, and I'm definitely here for all of you. And I will pass it back to Jamie, but thank you all for staying here today.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I was trying to stop the share, but Breya, wow, that was so amazing. I just want to read something, a tweet from Nola Girl, CCG underscore Nola Girl 47. They wrote, ask my teen mini me to join me for a few minutes for your teaching, Breya. She is engaged. She's standing here listening. She doesn't want to sit because then I would be right. Seeing me tweet, she walked away, but left the door open so she could hear. She asked me to get her some of June Jordan's work done.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wanna just say that because you should see the chat. It's literally so amazing. I learned so much. This was beyond amazing. Really contextualizing June Jordan's radical honesty, revolutionary honesty, her rage and her rightful rage, right? And centering what it means and giving us an outline network based on June Jordan as a poet, a theorist, revolutionary, of what it means to be a menace to our enemies. So I want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you. We are going to gear up for the Q&A section of this conversation, right? And before y'all been messaging this, Brea's recording, the teaching of Brea's teaching will be on Black Radical's YouTube. So don't worry, you can reference it, right? And go back to it. But we are gearing up for the Q&A portion. Oh, I just want to read this comment really quickly from Nicole. I'm a speech language pathologist and will be taking these ideas to my field, the power of words and communication. So just reinforcing, Breya, your amazing teaching. So there are a few questions. And I can see that we're going to have a lot of questions. So one of the questions, hi, Breya, regarding the journal questions, what aspect of the heart is at the peripheral? May you please elaborate more on what does the heart on the peripheral mean? Having some trouble getting this in context. And I'll also put these questions in the chat for everyone.
Yeah, so what I mean by like, what in your heart are you pushing to the side? Like what is not at the center? It's still in your heart. It's still important, but for some reason it's not getting to the center. And so I'm asking to look at our hearts fully and in its totality and saying, what have I pushed to the margins of my heart? And I think from naming that, we can kind of figure out why. And I got that question based on when she says in the video, you know, my heart is not peripheral to me. She says the whole thing isn't, right? And what I'm asking is what within our heart have we pushed to the peripheral? And so if I were to be, you know, very, very, very vulnerable and give you an example, I think something that I have pushed kind of to the margins of my heart is my need for community in the brand new city that I am living in, right? And like, why have I done that? That means that I need to confront my own inability to do X, Y, and Z here. So that's kind of what I mean by that. And I hope that explains it well enough to you. You can also make it mean whatever you want. It's your journal.
Great, thank you, Breya. So someone asked, how do you embody love in your daily life?
How do I embody love in my daily life? Like me?
Yes.
Oh, I think one way that I do this is that I'm always searching for love. I'm always searching for better ways that I can love. I'm always paying attention to the things that are making my love restrictive. And so one thing that I like to follow in my journals is when and why do I become withholding? And if I am withholding, I gotta really interrogate that. Is it because of my own internal script, or is it because of something that external that is happening, right? I have to figure out what my hindrances to love are. And that's how I truly embody it, right? Because for me, I believe that I am innately love, right? It's not that I need to find love or that I need to become love. I am innately love. So what is threatening my love? And what is giving my love a greater capacity, a deeper capacity? Those are things that I am interested in. But love is innately mine. And that is something that I hold true and dear to my heart.
Thank you. Thank you. And someone asked us, thank you for sharing. So someone asked, what was the article essay that had the phrase immune to the assessment of our enemies?
It's going to be in the reading essay that we dropped, because I'm blanking right now. Yeah, I can't think right now. I got 3 books in front of me, and I will definitely tweet that one out.
And everyone, we will also, Breya will be curating reading lists from both of her teach-ins, right? And so we'll make sure to drop that when it's live on blackmorradicals.com, so you can get all the info, purchase all the books on the brilliance that was and is and will forever be June Jordan. So we'll make sure to get all that.
Yeah.
So someone asked, I'm thinking about how so many poets and authors talk about loving and forgiving people who hurt you, freeing you from your hurt. I struggle with understanding this. How can we be loving people but also not sacrifice ourselves? Perhaps it's the way we understand the act of love. Could you expand more on the way you talk about how you do not celebrate the love thy neighbor kind of love and reconcile that with the way June Jordan talks of love and being nobody's fool?
Yeah, so, the first thing that I want to name is that forgiveness is a completely personal decision. And so I do know people, and survivors in particular, who that is their pathway, right? And I know people who are completely uninterested in that. And I think that I am just not interested in types of love that, and June Jordan, she writes this very explicitly in an essay, and where she kind of says that if it requires my suicide or my suffering, then the answer is no. And so for me, when I think about what it means to love, but undertake it in the way, in the poem Resolution 1003, I think about what it means to know who my enemies are and know very clearly that for me, unless they give up their power, give up the domination, stop being violent, give back their resources, I do not need to love them. That's not who I need to channel my love into. And so this idea that you will meet indifference with indifference and hostility with hostility, but you still make space within your body and your life to have love and meet passionate and eager love with passionate and eager love, I think is really profound. It was one of the most profound definitions that I've ever heard, that I think separate her from a lot of people who want a particular type of docile type of love, a type of kind of like, I love everybody no matter what, right? That type of thing. I don't have any utility for that. And a lot of people will disagree with me. I have no investment personally or politically in loving racist people. I have no investment politically and personally in like loving Nazis, right? Like love is not a universal rule for me in response to violence or oppression. I have no investment in that at all, but I am still deeply invested in love. And so I would rather choose to love so much so that I want to name and stop suffering wherever it is located. And I think for me, I choose to pour my love into those who are on the other end of the suffering, not the ones who are causing the suffering. And that's just where I am with it. I think that we all have our own healing processes. And do I agree that there is a level of anger or perhaps a level of bitterness or perhaps a level of negative emotions that can at some point become overwhelming for the body and the spirit and can cause you problems? I absolutely do believe that. But what I don't believe is that that's going to cause me more health problems than the suffering and the domination that I'm living under. I don't believe that hating my abuser per se is going to cause me more pain than the fact that that person is still out causing harm. I don't believe that that's going to cause me more pain than the fact that patriarchy exists. And I think that's the difference for me, at least. And a lot of other scholars and a lot of other love practitioners completely agree with me. And they think that love is universal and everybody is deserving of it. And what I say to that is, baby, yes, whoever you are in this world, you are absolutely deserving of love. That ain't got nothing to do with me because my love is mine and I don't have to give it to you. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Breya, for your offering. We have a few more moments, right? And I know that want to honor Breya's time and them speaking for a long time, right? So we're going to answer a couple more questions, y'all. So someone asked, when thinking about June Jordan, I'm filled with righteousness, compelled with anger and fervor, which I'm thankful for and live by. However, when taking up this rage, I can't help but think, as a Black woman or as Black women, how are we to navigate becoming a menace when so many already believe that we are menaces? Not that we need a reason, but I struggle communicating this with my community.
I think that oh, one second, my baby wants my attention. 1 second. I think that that's a really beautiful question. And for me, it kind of makes me go back to that example I gave about like being a Black woman and being called bitter, which has happened to me before. And kind of my response to that being to go back to the container that I am in, the environment that I am in, the people that I am reacting to. And so I can understand why it might be difficult to identify as a menace and be a menace when you already are one. And then I think I'm still in the camp of Black women writers who say, and that is precisely why we still have to do it. Because for me, if I am already through a white gaze, innately a menace, innately a problem, innately wrong, I don't gain anything by going to the opposite side of that and trying to absolve myself of that through Black excellence and respectability and all of those things that we know don't work. And so for me, I'm always wondering how we can flip it back on the container, back on the environment, back on the ism, back on the other person causing and doing the harm. And I think that we have to do that because we are going to die one way or another. And so for me, it's kind of back to what Audre Lorde said about like, they are kind of sort of going to kill us anyway. So, but we're not going to let them kill us and think that we enjoyed it. And I think that that's one of my biggest political investments at this time. But I do sympathize and I understand why that might be difficult. And I also want to shine light on the Black women writers who, like Bell Hooks, specifically talked extensively about what it meant to always be called difficult, right? She was always considered difficult. You tried to plan an event with her, she got called difficult, right? She stood so firmly in her politics and she always had something to say, right? Like the Black feminist killjoy is its own thing. And there is an isolation to that. There is a loneliness to that. And there is a way that makes you a target. And I don't want to act as if that's not a big hindrance. I also want to say that it's up to us as the community of folks who also seek to be menaces to do that with each other so that we share some of that burden. I want us to share the burden so that no one individual holds the shame. And I'm gonna stop there.
Thank you for that offering, Breya. I'm going to ask one last question, right? And like I said, everyone, this conversation will be on our YouTube, Black Women Radicals YouTube, and you can reference it, go back to it, share it. Breya will also be curating a reading list or 2 reading lists from their first teach-in, this one, Becoming a Menace to Our Enemies, and then the other teach-in, which I will announce soon. So yes, don't worry, y'all. We got you. Okay. Breya, last question. An anonymous attendee asked, they're currently trying to finish their doctoral program in clinical psychology and experience so much imposter syndrome that they can't write. We're just interested in how do you write and what was your process and even in making this presentation?
Yeah, so writing for me is definitely a spiritual practice. And one thing that I have to do is I have to handwrite first most of the time. I have to just write it on paper, write it out. I have to let the thoughts be scattered for a bit. And then what I do is after that, I go and I type it up when I can read my handwriting. That's one thing that I do. I understand that for me, because I'm, freelance and I do this work kind of independently from an institution right now, I'm not always on very harsh deadlines the way that I was in grad school. So I'm able to write when it comes to me. I'm able to write when I feel that kind of vibration in my body. But when I don't feel those things, and when I know I gotta turn in the chapter, the paper, the essay, I definitely have to go the method of I'm gonna write for just an hour a day type of thing. And I found that to be very helpful. But I can completely understand the role of imposter syndrome. It's so hard to push through that, especially as a student, a grad student. And so I guess I want you to figure out what your relationship to writing is, independent of any institution. Is your primary love of writing through journaling? Is it through typing? Is it in response to something? And I say nurture that primary relationship that you have to writing so that you don't lose that. And then when you have to do the mandatory writing, it doesn't feel as bad, right? So when I journal, when I write down my dreams, when I write down my reflective kind of questions to guide me in my own inner workings, that helps me remember the utility of writing in my own life. And then when I have to go do the assignment or the essay for work or school, it's a lot less difficult because I still know what my own relationship to writing is. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Breya. Once again, thank you for such a wonderful teaching, right? On becoming a menace to our enemies, the transformative teachings of June Jordan, right? Breya's teaching, or this is a first part. This is the first teaching of a 2-part series that Breya will lead. We have just amazing, opportunity to learn from Breya. And so their second teaching, y'all, is on Black women care ethics, radical love, and the anti-Black world, which we will be dropping the graphics for, but also you can register via our link tree on Black Women Radicals on Instagram, and we'll also be updating that as well. So thank you so much, Breya. You should see the chat. The chat is popping.
The chat so I can read it later.
Yes, we can definitely save the chat so we can read it later. You can read it later. But once again, just wanted to thank you so much for just this offering, generative and offering. I'm like so full and just want to say thank you once again. And please continue to support the School for Black Feminist Politics, which I mentioned is the Black Feminist Political Education arm of Black Women Radicals. And we can continue to keep these free teachings, right? We invite and pay Black feminists from around the world to expand the frame of reference of Black politics through the power of Black feminisms. So please support our work so we can continue to make these amazing teachings and these courses free, right? So thank you once again, Breya. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having me, Jamie. So much love to you and Black Women Radicals. And thank you to everybody else. I feel full too.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I just want to read a comment. Someone said, June Jordan is the voice I've been looking for. Thank you for shining the light on her. Wow. Oh my goodness.
I could just cry. Okay.
Oh, and if you start crying, I'm going to start crying because I'm sad. Okay.
Let's say that so we can exit out so I can just cry for a second.
Let it all out. But thank you, Breya, and y'all. The second teaching will be announced soon. So